Mechanistically, testosterone suits the direction that I need to push myself in more than any of these drugs. I was also wanting to not dysregulate my nervous system because it was very important that I could rest and recover. I am so much stronger in all other ways that I've worked on with self-development, and I was concerned that if I pushed the dose up too high, that it could impact some of that underlying state of disequilibrium. And I continue to challenge that with things like yoga and specific training programs to help with the disequilibrium. But yeah, I balance more with my eyes than most people would.
I wanted to find a couple things. So prior to you using the exogenous testosterone, did you have low testosterone prior to that?
I think if anyone knew me from 18 to 25, it was very clear that I did. I was very effeminate in my mannerisms, how I dressed. You know, I was also in a band and it was part of the look and the identity, but I went through I never tested my testosterone levels until I was about 21, 22. But prior to that, I'm sure that I would have had, very suboptimal testosterone levels for a young man. When I did check my levels right before I started, which was, I'd already been very dizzy and broken down for a long time, my free testosterone was just scraping the bottom of the range. So maybe not like debilitatingly low, but definitely not optimal. Low enough that I was very cautious about pulling the trigger in terms of if it would make a difference. And prior to that, when I was 21, 22, I think my free testosterone in picomole per liter, which the reference range at the moment is 200 to 600. It used to be much higher. I think it was like 400, 450, which is not terrible, but for someone in their early 20s who was living well and looking after themselves, it was pretty poor. So it was always low, but it would. And this is why I'm such an advocate for TRT when guys are in need of an intervention in their lives when they're not doing well. My levels may not have been, low enough on paper to warrant, a medical diagnosis of hypogonadism. But when I was in a situation where I was like, I need exogenous help to be able to get through where I'm at, it was either TRT or it was, dexamphetamine or other psychiatric medications. And I weighed them all up. I look at them mechanistically and, from a scientific standpoint, because I'd learned how to read studies. And I looked at it and said, well, mechanistically, testosterone suits the direction that I need to push myself in more than any of these drugs. And it doesn't come with all the neurotoxic downregulation that comes from cranking these neurotransmitters through the sky. So I was at a level where guys, I guess, would typically start to maybe show a little bit of symptoms, but I was in a situation where I needed to actually have a lot of courage and resilience, which I didn't have an ounce of at the time.
And this dose that you took, was this a supraphysiological dose specific for rehabilitation or upper end of normal, quote unquote?
So at the time, there was no information on this. Like there was Jay Campbell's first book, and it was like the first edition of that, which I think was about a 50-minute audiobook. And there was one doctor in Perth who would prescribe it, but we didn't know anything about, optimal protocols. There was not really anything on YouTube at this point. So I was prescribed 250 every 14 days, which at the time I did and had a great few days. And then I had a pretty abysmal, I was reading the half-life of the medication, and I was looking at the effects I'd had, and I was like, this isn't right. Went back to my doctor. He pushed it up to 250 every 10 days, which was 175 per week. I kind of worked out to split it into 2 doses at that point. And through that entire process, through the majority of that process, I was on 175 milligrams a week. And then towards the end of it, when I started to educate myself and, learn from a bunch of great guys at the time online, Dr. Keith Nichols, Dr. Jim Meehan, who very sadly passed away last month, John Chrysler, he also helped me for a little bit with this. I pushed my levels up to 210 milligrams per week at that point. And that put me, I'm a little bit of a low responder. So on 250 a week, I get on what the average guy would get on about 200 a week. Like, I'm a blunt responder biologically. But it put me to a free testosterone of about 1,000 to 1,200 in the units of, 200 to 600, which off the top of my head is picomole per liter. And I was also very cautious of not going into like steroid cycle territory because I was very fragile. So I was steering on the side of conservatism. And I was also wanting to not dysregulate my nervous system because it was very important that I could rest and recover. And I was concerned that if I pushed the dose up too high, that it could impact some of that underlying state of disequilibrium. I was very much not doing well at the time. So I think that dose for me was absolutely optimal.
And you changed to a bi-weekly split, or how did you end up dosing it in the end?
So we were using those Primatestin preloaded syringes. So when I first started doing it, I used like the 18 gauge 1.5 inch needle that came with it for a quad injection. Bro, I was like, I had to get everyone to leave the house. I'm like sweating. I'm like fucking terrified. I think I stuck it in like that far and injected it. It all leaked out my leg. And then I was reading about how people were using insulin syringes, and then I'm trying to draw it out of like the little hole, and it was just a nightmare at first. But once I worked out how to transfer it into a sterile vial from reading Jay Campbell's work, and I also had a guidance call from Dr. John Chrysler. He was doing international advice at the time. They both kind of guided me towards being like, look, when we look at the when we look at the science and when we look at where testosterone peaks in the body, twice a week is far more advantageous than once a week. So that got me straight on to twice a week. So I think I only did those big irregular shots maybe like 3, 4, 5 times. And then I was straight onto the bi-weekly shots. And there was a period in Australia where there was a Primatestin shortage. We didn't have Primatestin for like a year and a half. So we all had to swap to Sustanon. And because of the propionate and phenylpropionate esters, I found it was better to do that every other day. I just felt more stable. And then I was staying on every other day. I did 50 milligrams every other day for maybe the first 3 years I was on TRT.
50 milligrams every other day.
So 175 a week.
That 175 a week. Okay, cool.
If you've just started TRT, it is completely normal to feel overwhelmed and confused. There's a lot of new territory to cover, and there is a lot of conflicting information. I wrote TRT 101 so that you can have everything that you need to know in an instruction manual in one place that you can refer back to, that you can have all the questions answered before they even come up. TRT 101 is my best practice approach for TRT from start to finish, and it contains everything that you need to avoid all the challenges and pitfalls that I've seen come up in my clients over the last 5 years. You can check it out via the link below.
So after this testosterone regime, as well as the other medications, some over the counter, some not, was there anything else? Any other medications?
I was pretty anti-pharmaceutical after dropping out of psychiatry. BPC was the one that I used for the nerve recovery. And originally, I'd actually wanted to get a stem cell infusion. And I actually booked in with this doctor in Perth. And he was booked out for ages. And a lot of this has come into how I operate my business now, because a lot of people helped me. And this guy, he took the appointment, and I went in to see him, and he was a South African guy. He goes, I can't help you. I'm like, great. I'm like, why am I here? And he's like, I had what you had. And I was like, oh. I was like, so what can I do? And he goes, look, I can do a stem cell infusion for you. It's going to cost, I can't remember how much it cost, but significantly more money than I had at the time. I mean, at the time, I just got to the point that I could work 3 days a week for a not-for-profit doing digital marketing, but like on like a minimum wage role. But he was like, look, there's this peptide called BPC 157, and this will give you the majority of the benefits of a stem cell infusion for a fraction of the price. And I said, look, I'm on TRT. Is that going to help? And he goes, that's the best combination for it. And he goes, I can't prescribe it to you, but if you go to this clinic here, they'll be able to prescribe it to you. So this was back in like 2018, 2017. And so I called up the clinic, and they took me to the pharmacy, and they were like, look, we've only done this a few times before. Are you sure you want this? And I didn't really know much about it. Peptides weren't really much of a thing back then. And I was like, look, yeah, I've got nothing to lose here. I want to give this a try. And it was when I put the BPC in at the end of the rehabilitation, that's what made the process very good. When I first started TRT, we were all using aromatase inhibitors as well. So I was using like an anastrozole, like quarter of a tablet twice a week or something like that. And it was when I started to realize that, my joints were a bit sore, that, I think when I started doing a shot every fortnight and every week, I probably needed it. But when I was doing it twice a week, every other day, that became redundant. And I found that when I dropped the anastrozole out and put the BPC in, that's when I started making some really good progress. And I think I ran through maybe 2 20 milligram vials of BPC. I used it for almost 6 months. And that's what got me to the point of just using TRT from then on out. I mean, I experimented with pregnenolone, DHEA, thyroid, HCG, GH, all that kind of stuff in replacement dosing as part of my education and self-experimentation. But for the majority of my time on HRT, which is now coming up to 8 years, I've basically just been on TRT.
Remarkable, bro. This rise in your popularity must be quite recent then, like you said, since 2020, because at 2018, you're still somewhat struggling. I won't get into BPC 157 today, but it is noteworthy that some of the ailments people have healed from, when they throw that in, it's almost like magic. I mean, I've seen people that I trust their anecdote, that have had decade-long plus injuries. All of a sudden, 2 months later, it's gone completely. So that's just something I wanted to mention. And I know you've obviously seen that too with clients and in yourself. But are you now completely healed?
There's still scars. So like, I don't think the nerve will ever fully heal. So if you turn all the lights out, I can't walk in a straight line. I balance very strongly with my eyes. So I still do things that push my balance. Like I've been doing Muay Thai for like 3 or 4 years, and I'm worse than someone who's done it for like 12 weeks. Like I have a very poor internal sense of balance, but it doesn't impact my day-to-day life. And I'm definitely not 100% in terms of balance as to where I was before the injury, but I have compensated for that in all other aspects of my mental health, physical health, resilience, that I'm definitely a little bit damaged in that way, but I am so much stronger in all other ways that I've worked on with self-development. And I continue to challenge that with things like yoga and specific training programs to help with the disequilibrium. But yeah, I balance more with my eyes than most people would. But I'm okay.
Man, I did not know this, that you had struggled that much. Do you find that it gives you more compassion for clients now, having that experience?
Yeah, the main reason I do this is because I don't want people to go through what I went through, where everyone tells you that you can never recover and that you're fucked. There's the most difficult point that I had in that rehabilitation was when I couldn't get a diagnosis, and then I finally got a diagnosis, but that diagnosis came with the tag of this is something that's irreparable. Having no hope is very scary. And for people who've been there, suicide's not easy. So when you get to a point that you have lost all hope, but you're also not capable of pulling that trigger, it's a scary point, and it's a horrible point to be at. I became, when I got through this, people can believe what they want about God or spiritualism or the universe or whatever, but this was my rite of passage. This was I had a very privileged upbringing, and this was the hardest thing. I was not prepared for this. I went through hell, and I very strongly believe that I went through something that other people couldn't have got through. It absolutely brought me to my knees, and my purpose since then, the only thing that I have cared about since I got through that was helping other people go through their shit. I don't really care about anything else. It's one of the reasons why I haven't really gone much into the business side of this, the YouTube stuff, trying to make money. Like I have purely just been doing consulting calls all day, every day for years, because that's all I've cared about. And that to me has been a massive factor in this. Is I have a huge amount of empathy for my clients in terms of what they're going through, because I've been there. But it's also showing them to go, well, before this happened to me, I was the weakest person I probably knew. And I have a very, it's cliche, but if I could get through it, anyone could get through it. And that's why when I first heard that David Goggins podcast on Rogan's, when I heard him from where he started to where he got to, that resonated with me so strongly, because I was like, this is, people hear stuff like that and they go, oh yeah, that's someone else, or someone else could be like that. But, when you actually get backed into that corner and it's make or break, and it's kind of just you against you, and hope is minimalistic. And I wanted to be the person that I needed for other people, because I didn't have that guy when I was going through it. And that to me, I mean, when you're a musician and all you want to be is a touring musician and it doesn't work out and you have to go work your day job, that kind of blows, because you just find the thing that sucks the least to go, okay, I'm just going to do this and make money, but it feels empty. It hasn't been since doing music that I've found anything that gives me this much fulfillment and purpose and passion and meaning in my life. So I absolutely love my job, like truly, truly love it. And I I would have the same calls that I have all day with my clients for free. I often do when people can't afford to work with me. I'll find a way to make it happen because it's meaningful. And yeah, I think that my clients appreciate that because I hear them. And a lot of the time they need to be heard. And one of the most important things when a guy's going through struggles, in my experience, is to honor that and to be like, look, man, like that's the fact that you're getting through this and you've got through this up until this point is admirable. But the ball has landed in a steaming pile of shit and you still got to play it. And I think that's the most important thing when it comes to working with men is honoring their struggle, but not letting them have a victim mentality because it's like, yeah, well, suck it up because it sucks, but you've got to get through this just like everyone else does. And I think finding that middle ground of like tough love and compassion and care, but also accountability is what a lot of these guys need.
You have to understand is that testosterone does not by default make you a masculine man. It facilitates you becoming that man, but it will not do that work for you. How does testosterone impact how you feel, and how are those mechanisms occurring in the brain?